Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Attract Health, Build Wealth podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through codependency, allowing ourselves to attract health, build wealth, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us. And because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible. Yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and the love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. Today in episode 43, I am interrupting the Control series with an awesome guest interview this week. But before we get into the discussion, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode, any feedback you have, or anything you'd like me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. Remember, you can share anonymously. It is a safe place, and I would welcome the discussion. I also wanted to make, this is the last week of the announcement that I have been making. I'm super excited about. And if you follow me on any of the social media channels, you've probably seen that I'm offering my soul class for free. I'm putting finishing touches on a new course right now, and it's called How to Break Down, Break Away, and Through Any Bad Relationship Without Feeling Helpless, Afraid, or Being Alone Forever. And I want to make sure I don't leave anything out. So my question for you, will you let me know your biggest question about codependency? It could be anything. You may think it's silly, but I assure you it is not. All you have to do is submit your question, and in exchange for your advice, I'll give you free access to the soul class that's happening on Tuesday, April 28th. This course will eventually sell for $497, but you will get special access to experience the course for free when you let me know your number one question. That would be awesome. And to submit your question, just go to the website and click on Free Live Soul Class. And hurry up and get this in. I have 5 spots left, and I'm turning it off in about 4 days. So if you're listening to this, within that time period, it would be great to hear from you. So, on to today's episode. I was super excited when Angela Wetzel, aka the Epic Initiator, agreed to come on the show to talk about her experience with codependency. Angela is a deeper dating mentor. She's a root cause life coach. And in her own words, she helps heal painful and unhealthy relationship dynamics so you can live a life you love. I hope you enjoy this interview with Angela. Okay, Angela, welcome to the podcast. I wanted to start off with the standard question that I do for all my guests, which is, what do you know about codependency, or how has it affected your life?
I guess the question is like, what don't I know about it? I've been obsessed with learning about codependence and codependency like ever since I first really learned what it was, and learned that that was kind of at the root of, I would say, almost all my problems, like in relationship, in like following my life purpose. And actually, I was reading a book by Barbara Stanny, and I liked her definition of codependence.
Oh, cool.
She says, codependence is a psychological condition in which you ignore your own needs and desires to concentrate on, control, or caretake others. And the crazy thing about codependence is like it can be so much in the background and be running your life, and you will have no idea what it was or what it is, except like you kind of know that like your life isn't working or your relationships aren't working, your needs aren't getting met, and yet you're just like, what is it? Like, what is this thing in my blind spot? And that's kind of what I went through. kind of seeing it in relationships. I got married really young. I was in the military, and it was kind of, the thing to do the Army Married Couples program. And we kind of like eloped in Vegas, and I hadn't met his family. Big mistake. Don't do that. I don't recommend that for
But
anybody.
we learn from our mistakes, do we not?
Oh yes. So my life has been full of them. I have so much knowledge. So we eloped at this place called Weekirk of the Heather in Vegas. And my parents didn't really say much. Like, I think they knew we were getting married, but I didn't have a lot of advice, from my parents, or a lot of interaction that way. And after Vegas, I met his family. And so I started seeing some stuff like with his family, just like it starts with like the little things. Like, you can start to see some unhealthy relationship dynamics. Like, it can be something as simple as having a parent that like chain smokes and has bourbon in the middle of the afternoon. And as like innocuous as that sounds, like it doesn't seem like a big deal. It's like, for me, it's always been the little things that I've picked up on first. It shows up in like financial ways where, and I've seen it evolve in my relationships. So with my marriage, it was like, his family was very much financially dependent on us. And anytime I tried to step in and have boundaries, he would freak out and say, well, we're so much more fortunate than they are. Like, they can't do this for themselves. And I would get a lot of pushback. And then he would say, like, you're greedy, you're selfish, and all these things. And I didn't know what boundaries were, to be honest. Like, I wasn't feeling my feelings. I didn't know that. And so it just became a nightmare. Like, and I say this because I want to share my story, because like it's kind of it's embarrassing for me, but I know I just didn't know any better. We ended up having his sister and her husband and their 2 kids move in with us. He thought it was for an undetermined amount of time. I thought it was just till they got on their feet. So that was another thing. I worked for the government for 6 years. It was only supposed to be like a year. And I put all of my dreams and aspirations and everything on the back burner to essentially be like this helper to him and his family, and to kind of just be there to help support them. And I wish I could say that I was the one that was like, I'm divorcing you, I'm done with this crap. But he was the one that ended up divorcing me, because eventually at the end of all this, after the story's too long to tell the whole thing. It's like super crazy. But at one point we had like 5 vehicles. They weren't really pitching in. We were supporting his mother and one of his brothers, and it just got completely out of hand. There were no financial boundaries. I wasn't talking about my needs or my wants, or if I did bring it up, I would have this big, like, kind of emotional meltdown. I would have these emotional meltdowns because I wasn't able to express my feelings. I wasn't feeling them. I was very much like enmeshed, and I always experienced other people's feelings outside of my own so much more strongly, like as projections.
Mm-hmm.
So just even feeling my feelings, like it wasn't something I was familiar with for almost another 4 or 5 years after I got divorced. But essentially, like, we lost the house we were living in. So his family did move out, but then after our divorce, like, we didn't have any lawyers. Like, I just felt like I went along with a lot of things. I didn't, confrontation wasn't comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a huge part of it. Like, I wouldn't fight for myself. Like, I would fight for other people. I would be this huge, like, bleeding heart advocate. I'd want to pick up all the lost puppy dogs and kitties in the neighborhood. Like, I wanted to just take care of everybody, but I wasn't taking care of myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't see that because I never viewed myself like as a victim. until I realized later on that I was actually taught to be a victim. So there were all these ways that I had adopted, ways of being.
Can you go back? When was that epiphany moment? Did you have an aha moment where you're like, whoa, this is not the way it's supposed to be? Did you have
Right.
any type of...
Well, I wish I could say I had that sooner, but it was more like me kind of like paying attention to a lot of all these little details, like seeing the financial enabling, like seeing the enabling, but not understanding how I fit into it. So that was really confusing for me.
Mhm.
Another thing that was like on my radar was this pattern, like cycle of betrayal and cheating, which I feel like goes very well with codependence, because there's people that aren't communicating with intimacy or authenticity. They're not telling the truth, and they're
Mhm.
not turning towards each other to confront each other
Right.
about what their feelings are, what their needs are, like what, even like talking about their complaints. So I think whenever there's cheating and betrayal in relationships, what you have is one partner who's not going to the other, they're going to a third party and just adding a triangulation into the mix, instead of being brave enough to confront the truth, which
Mhm.
is a huge part of like what I do and what I teach. Um, but my aha moment actually came when I was in acting school. Even though I'd seen all this stuff, I think there's this like cultural sense of like, oh, everyone has a messed up life, or no one's normal, or
This is
everyone
normal to
has,
feel so crazy. Ah.
like this dysfunction's normal, like
Yeah.
everyone has their own crazy
Yeah.
uncle, that kind of thing. But it was when I was actually in acting school, and I had to do this one scene for Chekhov. And anyone that knows Chekhov or acting school, it's just like really dark, like depressing. Somewhat, I think it's a little boring. It's not really my taste. But I did this scene where there was like a fire in the neighborhood. A lot of people had lost their homes, and they had triage set up. I think it was from Three Sisters.
Sorry.
So there was like this triage.
That's the Great Dane. Hey. All right, we're back. Okay, check off.
So it was from Three Sisters. So they had this like triage set up in their home, and they had they had burn victims and people that had lost their homes and everything. So it was a really serious scene. And according to my acting teacher, and she was like, her name was Anya, and she was so very passionate about Chekhov. And she gave me notes, and she's like, Angela, she's like, what I don't understand is how you can be one of the most compassionate and empathic actors that I know, and have done this scene like it was just a walk in the park, like another day. And I started looking at that, and I thought, that's not normal. And how did I miss that? Like, what happened in my brain to just like gloss over some of those details that would have informed me like of this bigger tragedy? And so that was one thing that really caught my eye, just for me personally, because while I could always see everything outside of me, like I could see the betrayal, I could see the enabling, I could see the patterns, but it was always outside of me. I didn't know what my part was in it. It was when I was in acting school that I started to see like the way that I was operating in the world, and like the way that I would see things or not see things. That really started to like illuminate what was going on underneath. And like the biggest piece of the puzzle was when I had a voice class, and I was supposed to be doing the scene from Julius Caesar, and I was playing the daughter. I forget like what the characters. I don't even know if Caesar was in the scene, but I was supposed to get angry at my father in the scene, and I couldn't feel my anger at all. Like I just was like, I can't access my anger. Like I feel nothing. I feel numb. And my acting teacher was or my voice teacher, Katie Bull, like she was very astute. And she because I had pulled her to the side, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I just can't feel anything. And she said, "Can I ask you some personal questions?" And I'm like really open. So I was like, "Sure, like fire away." And she was like, "Are either of your parents an alcoholic?" And I was like, "No." She was like, "Narcotics?" Nope. And she went through the list, like gambling, violence. Like she just went through all, like workaholic. She went through this list. And finally she said, she was like rageaholic. And I was like, that sounds like my dad. And so she recommended that I read this book called The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller. And that kind of started my like whole digging process. And I really started to dig really deep into psychology. And that led me into, I've been reading books on psychology and stuff like this for the past, it's probably been 8 years. So I've probably been studying relationships for over a decade now, and codependence for about eight years, maybe. So I remember I started checking out all these books from like the library. I was going to the library in New York, and I was holding this book by Dr. Susan Forward called Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them. And I just was like holding this book going, oh my God, this is my parents' relationship. This is crazy to see it on these pages. And also, I think it was in that book where she says, shame is the core emotion of codependence. And I was just like, like my mind just like sort of exploded. But it's funny because the whole reason this was sort of on my radar is like much more of like a woo-woo reason, because like it was all these separate pieces, right? I had ended up in LA. Yeah, so this was after that. So I ended up in LA doing this like spiritual teacher. It was like a seminar. And this woman there was like, look around, if you're here, you're like a spiritual teacher. And I was like, okay, whatever, because clearly you don't have the right person. I just happen to be here. And she had taught something called scientific hand analysis. And if you know anything about it, it's kind of infused with some palmistry, but what it is, it's like a repeatable scientific process by which they have different rating systems for the prints in your palm, in your fingerprints. And what they do is based on all those, it's just so fascinating. The guy that developed its name is Richard Unger. His book is called Life Prints. But essentially, it gives you your life purpose, your life schools, like all your life lessons, and then your blind spot. And the reason why I was so fascinated is that like my life purpose seemed so in line with everything I wanted. So I was like, yay, that's awesome. And then when I was looking at my life, like my blind spot, my life lesson, like the thing that would keep me from my purpose, it said, and this was the list, it was like shame, victimization, loss of passion, staying in dead situations and relationships too long. There's probably like another few, and I'm like, loss of power.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, so it's my blind spot. I guess I just don't identify with it. Like I don't get it. I don't get what it is. And when I was holding that book and it said shame, I was like, oh my God, this is my blind spot. Like I was like, I see my blind spot. And then I was like, well, what now? Kind of. So that was, I think, part of the reason why I was able to make that part of it click. And the other thing that really helped was me having all those awarenesses and like acting school leading up to that, and reading all the books on psychology and just starting to dive deeper. And after going to that seminar, I met somebody on the plane on the way home during this blood moon lunar eclipse. And it was just this like crazy day full of like wild synchronicities. And I'm actually writing a book about it because it was just so insane. And when I met him, like everything was amazing and clicked, and he was very handsome. And we ended up talking like the whole plane ride, and then we like hung out, and he walked me to my train, and then we talked on the phone a little bit, and we were supposed to go on a date. So I don't hear from him for like a few days, maybe 4 days, 5 days, and I'm like starting to obsess about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, why am I obsessing about this dude? Like, I've just met him. I've spent 3 hours with him. Why is he like in my brain? Like, why is he running laps around my brain? And why am I so obsessed, like thinking about him, these obsessive thoughts? And then all of a sudden, that Robert Palmer song just pops into my head, Addicted to Love. And it was just like, you're gonna have to face it, you're addicted to love. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a love addict, but I didn't like know what that meant. So I ran to my computer and I like put in love addict, and all of Pia Melody's work came up like on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought her 3-part series on codependence, love addiction, and intimacy. And that was kind of like the beginning of this like crazy journey of just studying the hell out of love addiction and codependence, because they go together like peas and carrots. And then I started going to therapy probably a little bit before, like in between some of that started happening. So maybe in like 2014. So I started having all these realizations like, oh my God, like I was technically abused.
Mm-hmm.
And I know abuse is this like really big hot word where most people, because of the way that our brains are set up, like our autonomic nervous system, we have all these protective mechanisms of like suppression, repression, denial. So because I had studied psychology in college, I already knew that like the brain and like, the ego or whatever would throw all these smoke screens over a lot of the stuff that happened, because it's essential that we survive our childhood. And I just started to realize that the way that I was raised had been really abusive, and it was very codependent.
Yes.
And I had a very enmeshed relationship with my mother. So like, I just started learning about all this stuff. And then when I started taking on clients, I like could learn even more, because I started seeing the repercussions of emotional abuse and people that weren't hit, because I wasn't hit. So I just thought I wasn't abused, like I wasn't hit. My dad was angry, no big deal.
Yeah.
But I was raised to walk on eggshells and modify my behavior so I wouldn't enrage my father. And so that was a way that I learned, like, you don't confront somebody when they're angry, you just shrink back, you hide. So I was taught to hide behind furniture or leave or whatever.
Or in your mind.
Yeah, because I wasn't protected.
Yeah.
I wasn't protected by my mother. And like, the crazy thing is like my parents also, I think this happens with everyone, and I call it our blind inheritance, because it's like when you start learning more about generational trauma and you think about your own personal genealogy, you realize that you come from this like long line of survivors, right? Yeah. And even as our mother, I'm sorry about this, the noise in the background.
It's all right. They might as well be talking to themselves, these two.
But even as our mothers are inside of our grandmothers, we're already there. And they've just found that we're already like picking up on some of those hormones, like cortisol and norepinephrine and all these different things. So our nervous systems are already being shaped while we're inside of our grandmother, inside of our mother. Just totally nuts, right?
Yeah. That's the mind blown emoji for sure.
Yeah. So like all of these behaviors and protective mechanisms that, while they were learning and their nervous systems were being informed by their environment and the hormones were being created and everything, that is also affecting us. But also as we're raised, it's like all the nonverbal communication, like all of the shadow emotions that are like pushed down. So in my family, anger was like a no. And I've started to find that when you disown your anger, you disown your own power. Like you can start to implode. And a lot of people get stuck into victimization because instead of feeling their own power, because they saw only abuse of power or abuse of authority or whatever.
No boundaries.
No boundaries.
Yep.
They make the decision like, I don't want to be like that and I will never be like that. And so we unconsciously either choose to replicate the abuser or to deny that behavior, because we usually think there's only two options, right?
Yep.
We don't see anything else. It's either this, yes or no. It's not like, what's healthy, right?
Mm-hmm. Perfectly put. Hold on one second. I want to go back a little bit to the Pia Melody stuff, because my little tidbit about her is that the facing like the whole, I have obviously the series and I have it almost committed to memory, but the facing codependence one was like, for me, in talking about abuse, and I've never been hit that I know of, like I did not suffer egregious, sexual trauma, but that book completely changed my view of, the kind of trauma that I was dealing with unknowingly. I've even, like, the book that I'm writing is really just all of those revelations brought out, because I think that's important, because, in a way people do judge trauma, which is if you weren't hit or, you didn't have all these egregious things happen, which are very, severe, and it is scary. And if you're listening out there, like, I'm there for you. We are there for you. But what's not talked about is the little things, the spiritual, emotional, financial, sexual, all those little boundaries that have been crossed. And what is the sustained crossing of those boundaries is what the trauma leads to, which is insane. And also I wanted to kind of close this up. I know it's been about 20 minutes or so. And we were talking about this, we can talk about this for hours. So,
yes,
so hopefully all the listeners out there, you've connected to Angela. I'm so glad that I was able to have her on the podcast, because I like the different perspectives. And I know that probably some things that she said resonated with you. So, Angela, where can our listeners find you? If they want to hear more about your story, more of what you're doing now, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I actually have a lot of stuff out there. I blog on Elephant Journal, so I have a lot of stuff about love addiction from a love addict's perspective and part of that healing journey. So I have quite a few blogs on there. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. So my handle's at Epic Initiator. So it's like, I don't know if I need to spell it, but it's like,
I'll link everything in the notes too. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, or you can go to my website, which is www.epicinitiator. And I have, all different kinds of ways to work with me. I do one-on-one coaching, and a lot of it is based on codependence, but I don't always lead with that because people don't always know what that is. And what else? Yeah, I do a lot of videos. I have a few things on YouTube, not that much. So I'm trying to put more of my stuff out there, but I think that's kind of it. Oh, I also have an 8-week deeper dating course coming up starting April 29th for 8 weeks. So that's going to be a workshop and group coaching. And we are going to cover a lot of stuff similar to this, like feeling our own emotions, learning our own value and worth and authentic voice, and uncovering our wounds and how we can translate that into what we really need and how to communicate that in relationship. So it's going to be some good healing stuff. I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And thank you so much for coming on the show. It was amazing to meet you. Yeah. And all you magnificent souls out there, please connect with Angela. I'm sure she would love to hear from you. And then we'll see you next time.
Bye.